Bruce Feldman in The Athletic wrote a piece. One team's NFL draft scouting report on Brock Purdy shows how he became Mr. Irrelevant. On the NFL team scouting report, the most eye-catching information of all the categories was in the box listed for final grade. It simply read in all caps, no interest. So that's how it starts. Now, is that how you guys used to write your reports?
Yeah, I think some teams do reject or
reject.
I think if teams that have like not a box to check where you write it out yourself, you'd go not for us.
Gotcha.
Not a player I would recommend. I think some teams have for the league, like might play in the league, not for us. I mean, there are different. No interest is that.
So there's not a number assigned to a player grade.
I think it depends on the grading scale.
Like the baseball. You and I both know baseball scouts.
The Patriots have numbers like 6.2, 6.3.
That everybody you would have a number, right? Yeah. Like an 80 is a superstar, a 70 is an all-pro, a 60 is a starter, a 50 is a rotational guy. Like you would think you would have something.
I think some teams do it for the league, and some team like the Patriots are big on doing it for your own team. It doesn't matter where he looks in the league. Like, does he start for us? Does he play for us? Would he not make our roster? No interest sounds a little bit like sometimes coaches get their own style of report.
Gotcha. Well, Bruce Feldman talked to an NFL coach, who shared with him their scouting report, his unnamed team scouting report, and we're going to go through it now, and we can scout the scouting report. This is what it said. In his report, the coach wrote this about Brock Purdy. He did not test well, limited athlete that has a maxed out body, very mature and experienced, threw it okay. Did not impress at the NFL Combine. Okay?
Yeah.
We'll stop on some of these. Here's what he wrote the strengths for Purdy in the report were. Very experienced, manages a game well, making routine plays consistently, creative as the play extends, and quote-unquote works through his progressions well. Weakness, sawed off.
Means small, short, compact.
Not very good athlete. Limited arm, both in strength and throw repertoire.
Can't make a lot of throws.
Would you say most quarterbacks works through what percentage of quarterbacks you think that you scouted works through the progressions very, very well?
I think it's an easy thing to write for a guy that's experienced that doesn't do a lot of things well. It's basically saying he's a smart, like he understands his offense very well.
And do you think
and basically I'm writing this guy stinks, but why was he such a good player in college? Because he was very smart and very experienced player.
And you think that's a common? Do you think at least half quarterbacks can get that?
I think if you went to the scouting community, they would say, so many people now run a Leach, Lincoln Riley version of the spread offense. It's very different than, I think Iowa State, is it fair to say, a little old school of an offense? They'd had two backs. They would run somewhat of a pro style offense. It's a little different than in Mike Leach's, like, they run two routes. I think it just depends on the offense.
8 total plays. Yeah. By the way, Sirianni very close with the Iowa State coaches. Very close, like knows them very well, knows Campbell very well. I didn't catch what the connection was.
Was he asked about Purdy and he said he's buddies with Matt?
Yeah. He said he knew about Brock. He really knew about Brock because he's very tight with the Iowa State staff, he said.
And Matt Campbell cried on his senior day.
That's right. Okay, the NFL coach who wrote the scouting report. Monday, Bruce Feldman talked to the guy. He says this. The biggest thing that stood out differently from his college film to now, and John Lynch actually said this a few weeks ago, is his athleticism. I don't remember him moving like that at Iowa State. And then it goes through the list again. Didn't test well. He jumped 27 inches, which is terrible. He ran a 4.85. He's got short arms, like really short. He's got small hands. He's 6'1". His arm's okay. The twitchiness just wasn't really there. His short shuttle was okay. Not outstanding.
I completely agree. Like I didn't study him at Iowa State, but clearly his athleticism, even if you thought he was a good athlete coming out, is glaring when you watch him play in the NFL. His movement ability, right?
Don't you think? Let me ask you this. it would make sense to me if part of the problem with he looks better as an athlete in the NFL than he did in college is that when you watch him in college, is it possible he looks the same and you just watch him in college and say, well, what works in college, and the article points this out, and you guys talked about this, like Johnny Manziel didn't translate. Baker Mayfield, he ran around a lot in college, didn't translate. Zach Wilson looked more athletic in college than he does in the NFL, doesn't translate. For whatever
the conference hurt him. The conference hurt him. I think if he's doing it in the SEC or the Big Ten against a lot of guys that are getting drafted on defense,
yeah, exactly.
He's viewed different. I remember last year a stat like the Big 12. I think they had a couple year stretch where their defensive players being drafted was minuscule to non-existent, especially up front. So he could not have played to the stats, the success he had. Let's just say he was the starting quarterback at Mississippi State or South Carolina, and his teams had success against every single week. LSU, Georgia, Florida, right? All these guys are getting drafted, and people would have wrote this, right? Because you would have been like, well, he just ran away from that guy who's going to go in the third round. I think you're watching me like, well, who's this guy playing at K-State? Or who's this guy playing for Mike Gundy? And usually it's not an NFL guy.
Oklahoma, Texas.
Even Oklahoma. They've Texas, remember 2 years ago, didn't have a player drafted.
Yeah, well, exactly. Next quote.
Do you agree that the specific conference when it comes to defense of the Power 5, they're the worst on defense? Like, look at the Pac-12. They have a ton of defenders that get drafted every year. All the DBs, a ton of linemen.
A lot of linebackers. Devin Lloyd goes in the first round.
Yeah, pass rushers.
Kenneth Murray went in the first. I mean, like guys go in the first round.
But I think even Kenneth Murray over a couple year span was kind of an outlier getting drafted really high in the conference on defense.
Yeah.
Because Texas and Oklahoma used to produce a ton of front seven guys, and Texas dropped off a cliff. And even Oklahoma under Lincoln was not exactly a defensive factory.
Next up, one school of thought the coach said is that if you're going to take a quarterback in the first round, he needs to be elite at one thing. That was the whole debate with Mac Jones. What's his one thing that he's really great at? Well, he processes well. He's really accurate, which is hard to see physically. That was the thing with Burrow until everyone ended up coming around on him. He's fast, but he's not that fast. His arm's good, but not great. Well, it turned out he's just a ball.
Everyone came around on him. He went one.
That's what you mean. Everyone came around. He won a Heisman. But so he's talking about how tough it is to evaluate to be a first, because what he ends up saying in this, and I don't think I have that quote here, is he thinks he would have been a second or third rounder if you redrafted it now.
I agree.
Second or third round?
Probably second. He plays quarterback. He's pretty good.
Yeah. What is, like, in hindsight, is Mac great at one thing, right? I mean,
no, I don't think he's great at anything. Now he gets his boy back. We'll see if he can get him rolling.
Oh, yeah,
again.
Bill O'Brien. Yeah.
I think one thing he's saying here, and this goes back to one of the earlier comments, when he's great at his progressions or he's great at, understanding the offense, you don't quantify that. And when things aren't quantifiable, it's harder to pound the table for it. And it was my issue with Mac Jones wasn't he can't figure out how to regurgitate a playbook, right? But you can't, because clearly that he understands that. Brock Purdy, I think one thing that they'll say coming up in this article was like the motions, all the stuff going on. He clearly has all that stuff down, which you can't quantify that. And part of the hardest part about Kyle Shanahan is understanding that. Now, eventually,
why the Niners like Trey Lance, remember?
Yeah, but eventually, like, okay, the offensive play calls. Like, you then have to be able to execute it. And it goes back to he's clearly much more athletic than people thought. And I would say his arm, average at worst. It's not high end, but it's not bad. It's more than serviceable in the NFL, I think. If Dak Prescott and Cousins, plus you would say
Dak throws it better down the field based on what we've seen, even though he
but I'm just
one throw.
But my point is that if you can, your arm strength can improve a little bit over time. He's young. He's 22 years old. Strength program.
Like Brady's did, right? Tom,
for sure. And again, I'm not acting like this guy's ever going to be Josh Allen, but like Joe Burrow is more than functional. He doesn't have a great arm.
This is the part you just mentioned. The coach said, what I think is really making him successful is he processes a lot of information pre-snap because they do a lot of motion shifts, kills, alerts in that offense. It can be hard to just snap the ball and know which way to hand the ball off. His composure late in the down. He hasn't really made many boneheaded mistakes. He's been really impressive. Which, by the way,
I like this last part. Even this guy noticed. He did have one Sunday when he threw the ball away, almost ended the half, and Kyle Shanahan motherfucking him under the call sheet for 10 seconds. This coach noticed that too. It was Kyle's fault.
This guy's watching. You know he's a coach because he did not blame Kyle.
Not at all.
He didn't add to it. But, in fairness, he's a young player, and Kyle asked him.
Or, Kyle did blow the 25 seconds off the play clock, put him in a tough spot. It was just that Kyle's undressed him, which Kyle was.
This part of it is relevant this week because it is a road game in a tough road environment, right? If you rely on a lot of pre-snap communication, which the Niners do, relying on pre-snap communication, and the Niners, I don't know if it's different than any other time, but it feels like that play clock gets down on them sometimes fast.
I think that happens a lot with young quarterbacks.
So that, to me, is an element of this game. We're talking big picture Brock scouting report here, but against the Eagles in this environment, if you rely on pre-snap communication, that is more challenging at the link than it is, playing the Rams on the road or playing at home.
I think in the highest level games, and I think you saw this 2 years ago when Alabama played Georgia twice. They played in the SEC championship game, and they played again in the championship game. And I think you see it in the conference championships and the Super Bowls. It's the ultimate combination in the sport of football. And I'm sure it's like this in the sweetest high school football championship games of the best players and the schematics, right? Because you can just out-talent a team maybe in the first round of the playoffs or to win a division through certain games. In certain games, you use your scheme. But in the big playoff games, like, to me, those coaching staffs right now, it's all about, like, getting our sweet players. We're going to need them to play well, and the Jimmies and the Joes, but it's also going to be big about the X's and the O's, right? Like, what wrinkles are we going to do to chip Hassan Reddick or chip Nick Bosa or get Deebo Samuel open or rattle Brock Purdy? What things are we going to do for Brock Purdy to make it easier on him? How are we going to slow down Jalen Hurts? And this is where, because I think the argument would be, just like listening to you read this out loud, I read it myself earlier, is if I was in a draft room, and because Brock Purdy's name is going to come up a lot, don't you think, over the next 3 months when me and you were sitting on the couch watching the combine and DJ's talking about it. Well, you got to look at quarterbacks differently with Purdy's success in draft meeting rooms. Could Purdy, because his intellectual capacity is so high, he figured out stuff that it takes a lot of young players a long time to figure out. He already got it right away. Like, physically, he's not going to get much better, right? He's never going to, this is as fast as he's ever going to be. Maybe his arm gets slightly better. He's already an accurate player.
His release get a little quicker.
But you'd say that's not really an issue for him getting rid of the ball. Like, can he get a lot better? Like, is there a lot of room for improvement besides, like, situational improvement? Because you'd say, well, shit, he's pretty calm, cool, and collected right now, right? It's not like he needs to be more, like, learn to be less frenetic.
Sure, but I also think you could say, and I wonder this, can you win a Super Bowl with him? Can you beat Jalen Hurts and or Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes with him?
We're about to find out.
Because how many great quarterbacks has he beaten?
Hasn't. Brady?
Yes.
Yeah.
Final quote here. We undervalued his agility and probably the mental side, and San Francisco's perfect for it because they put a lot of importance on that, because their offense in San Francisco, he can play action and boot and manage the game. It's not like he's playing in a system like Buffalo where the Bills are just relying on Josh Allen sitting back and hucking the ball all over the field. Just a nice little opinion. We know it's not Sean McDermott, I guess.
Don't you love when a coach is just give and takes, but then has like a collateral shrapnel at other teams, just
Best
like
part
an unintended just grenade at some other team? Well, it's not like they're doing what the Browns are doing. It's never just like, Kyle does a really good job. What makes Kyle different than those idiots with the Cowboys? It's always like, you always got to they can't help themselves. They cannot. It would be no different if we got college coaches in the SEC. It's just constant shots at other people that have nothing to do with the article.